My name is Francesca Passeri, and I am Deputy Director for the European Crowdfunding Network. And I am very happy to introduce the CrowdTuesday format for this year, and also the topic for today. A few technical indications. You see that you have been all muted. That is to ensure that we can run this session without too many technical issues. But of course, this is a format where we want to really encourage interaction with the panelists that I will introduce very shortly. So please feel free to, if you have any questions throughout the session, to type them in the chat, and then I will relay them to the speakers. And if you have any technical issues as well with audio, please also use the chat to communicate, and my colleague Sanya will take care of that. So having said that, we have now around 1 hour to discuss topics that have been increasingly important in recent times. So we are trying to bring together today a number of different areas that are of utmost importance. The first one is, of course, energy efficiency. So sustainability, energy efficiency have been on top of the priorities list in recent years, but also since a long time. And now we know that the European Commission is trying to push for a really radical change and promote investment in the sense of energy efficiency. So this is the first topic that we're going to discuss today. And then, of course, we try to address the topic of sports. This is somehow linked to the topic of sustainability, but even more so to the topic of engagement from fund bases. Different sports, of course, have a different profile in different countries, but we know with, for example, now the Winter Olympics, that there is this feeling of attachment towards sports. And so within the framework of today, we're going to try and link together, or actually, I'm just going to try to understand more from the experts that are working on this topic. How does sustainability, sports, and citizen engagement go together? And in this framework, how does crowdfunding enable this connection, or does it enable it? Do we have any good practice that links crowdfunding to these three topics? I am very, very pleased to have the company today of two experts on the topic, two Andreas, Ms. Andrea Kollmann from the Energieinstitut at the University of Linz, project manager for the GREENFOOT project. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you very much, Francesca.
Thank you for joining us. And Andrea Bogi, Senior Research and Project Manager at the European Crowdfunding Network. Dear colleague, thank you, Andrea, for giving us the coming insights on crowdfunding and all these topics that I've just introduced.
It's a pleasure, and thanks for everyone that joined.
I know that we should have been joined as well by Hubert Rovers from EFDN, but unfortunately a last-minute commitment prevented him from joining this session. We wish him a speedy recovery. I know that we have some of his team in the audience, so I just want to encourage those that are representing EFDN to please feel free to jump into the discussion and to contribute should they have any comment or integration to what we're going to present. So thanks again for taking the time to be with us today to explain and to explore the topic of how crowdfunding connects with sports. We're going to dive deeper into a specific type of sport, which is football, quite popular, at least in Europe. And without further ado, I would actually ask Andrea Kollmann to give us a bit of an introduction about your organization, the interest that you have in sustainability topics in general, and even more so on how you are addressing the topic of crowdfunding in refurbishing or providing energy efficiency installations for sports building.
Thank you very much, Francesca. I hope the presentation works as it did.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you. So it is my pleasure today to present to you some results of the GREENFOOT project that I've been working on with my two colleagues, Benjamin Kirchler and Ryan O'Reilly, who are also in the audience today, to back me up with any detailed questions that might come up. Let me give you a brief introduction to what GREENFOOT is actually about. GREENFOOT is a Horizon 2020 funded project. We started in September 2020. We still have ample time until August 23 to work on our concepts in 7 countries and with 9 different partners. We're a pretty interesting group of people, I would say. We have the National Football Associations of France, Azerbaijan, and Ireland on board. We have EDF on board. Reno Consulting, an Italian engineering provider. EUROCROWD is supporting us, as well as ECN and EFDN. In addition to that, we're very happy to have the direct support of UEFA, who serve a bit of a punching ball, giving us ideas, telling us what they are thinking about and what they think we should think about in our project. And we have another supporting partner, and that is Malmö FF from Sweden, a very well-known, very successful football club who's following our project and is supporting us. So what are we actually doing? Our core concept in GREENFOOT is to finance sport building, energy efficiency renovations, and renewable energy installations through innovative crowdfunding schemes. When we set out to draft this project and to submit it to the European Commission, the core idea that we had was to bring as many citizens into make them active participants, active investors in the energy transition through their love of sports, especially in our case, football, as well as their love for their favorite team. And their love also for hopefully the football buildings that are associated with their favorite teams. We want to, and this is what we're currently working on, build such a replicable funding scheme, base it on as many possible factors that we can find out about what people actually want to see in a crowdfunding campaign, what would interest them, and what would motivate them to get engaged in crowdfunding. And then, and this is going to be something that we're going to start in the mid of this year, is an end-to-end demonstration of our concept to see, are we on track? Is what we've been working on actually what people want to see and what people want to engage in? Before I go to the rest of my presentation, why football buildings? And why do we actually turn this energy transition topic into something that we think is really important in the football world? What we know from sources from the European Commission is that in order to achieve the European Green Deal and all the goals, policy goals that we set out to achieve until 2030, 2050, we're going to need an additional 260 billion euros per year. With additional, I mean, in addition to what we are already investing into the energy transition. Where does this money come from? So the idea that we are having is that the majority of citizens are at the moment completely disengaged from this investor market, either because they don't know about it or because they do not have the resources to make substantially large investments. But they might be active and might become active with smaller amounts in crowdfunding campaigns, and thus just by the number of them make a significant difference. And football buildings, we all know them, they are massive, very visible, very well-known buildings that are also high energy consuming. So they make an interesting case study just because if we can demonstrate something successfully about energy renovation, about renewable energy installations, this will be something that is widely seen in the community, or even by a further audience when we think about the great tournaments that we have in the European Union, where these stadiums always play a big role. So this is why we decided to look at football buildings. There's also a technical aspect to it. About 10% of all buildings in the European Union are estimated to be in some way sports related. So this is a significant share of buildings in the European Union. And there are, depending on what studies you look at, on average, somewhere between 30 and 50% of energy could be saved by renovations in these buildings and by installing renewable energy technologies. This is a big project, so we cannot talk about all its aspects. What we picked out today to present to you is a survey that we did. And we did this survey to learn about what people actually think about crowdfunding campaigns, whether they would be willing to participate in a crowdfunding campaign, and whether it makes a difference if this is football specific or socially framed. We're going to come back to that point later on. And of course, for our project, who is the target group? When we talk about football, when we talk about football buildings, who are the ones that we should have in mind, and what factors should we have in mind when we decide a crowdfunding campaign? You see the numbers here. We conducted the survey in summer 2021. So it's pretty fresh data from France, Ireland, Sweden, and Azerbaijan, about 3,500 people. And this is important to keep in mind for the following slides. This is a general population. So it's a representative sample from each country, representative in the usual suspects of sociodemographics, age, gender, income, and education. So that we learn, if we go out with a crowdfunding campaign in GREENFOOT, what will people tell us? Well, we talk about football, so the very first question is, are you interested in football? And a general population, on average, 44% of people tell us that they are interested in football. You see a bit lower numbers in Azerbaijan. Now, Azerbaijani colleagues told us that this is because in Azerbaijan, contact sports are more interesting to the general public than football is currently. But also, maybe as a side note, why Azerbaijan is part of our consortium, thankfully, is because of Euro 2020. They decided to be on board of our project. About a third of people say they are not interested in professional football at all. And a follow-up question to this interest in football question that we asked people is, who do you support when you're interested in football? And 37%, unsurprisingly, support the national team. But a fourth of them go for the local team, and about 20% say that they are mainly interested in one of the big foreign clubs. So this was it about, are people interested in football? The next one, obviously for us, it was interesting to know more about crowdfunding literacy. Do people actually know what crowdfunding is? And here we have some rather interesting results from my point of view. 61% of people in Ireland say, yes, I've heard about crowdfunding, or I've been in part of a crowdfunding campaign in the past. With only 30% in Azerbaijan saying they know what crowdfunding is all about. In France and in Sweden, numbers are pretty split. Building on this, and when you think about the questionnaire that we send out, of course, we told all the people who said, I have no idea what crowdfunding is, we gave them a quick primer to explain it to them afterwards. And then ask them what would motivate them to participate in any form of a crowdfunding campaign. And here results are getting really interesting, because when you look at the first two parts, the first potential answer was to get a good financial return. I'm an economist by training. I would have expected these numbers to be way higher, but to help protect the environment and people voiced concern about climate change was an even stronger answer in nearly all of the countries, especially a strong answer in France. For us, this is an important outcome because it tells us a lot about how to frame the crowdfunding campaigns that we come up with now, where to put the focus on in the communication of our crowdfunding campaigns. The next one and it keeps on being interesting from my point of view. And it was interesting for us when we saw the results of the survey. We asked people, okay, imagine you engage in a crowdfunding campaign. What kind of financial return would you prefer? And to all of our surprise, a fixed reduction on the monthly electricity bill was the answer of all these answer categories that people chose. And a lot of people chose above the classical returns of either a fixed interest rate or a variable interest rate. It's also interesting here to say that we have 19% of people who say they're unsure. This is probably related to their familiarity with crowdfunding per se, and maybe they just don't know what else could be out there as a reward. But we also have 16% of people who say a financial reward is not interesting to me. So this gives us food for thought. Think about what other ways of rewarding people for their investment could be out there in our project. Now, I said at the beginning that we wanted to know whether it makes a difference if I ask people whether they invest in a football stadium or in something else. So what we did is we split the 3,500 people we had into 2 equal groups and asked half of them whether they'd be likely to actually invest their own money in a football specific crowdfunding campaign for a stadium. And the other half we asked whether they would invest in a socially framed campaign, in our case, one that reduces the carbon emissions of a local school or a local library. And just by looking at the results here, you would think that this is the end of our project, because obviously people would rather invest in a school or a library and are much less likely to invest in a football stadium. 28% of people said they're very unlikely to invest in a football stadium. But, and this is a big but and a good but for the sake of our project, we took a deeper dive into the data, and what we see is that football fans are a completely different crowd than other people in our survey. And which is good for us, they are 18% more likely to invest in a crowdfunding campaign that has a football related building at its center. So the original idea that we had to involve people via their love for football in the renovation of football buildings seems to be something that was a good idea, and something where we're on a good track to actually achieve engagement in such crowdfunding campaigns. We wanted to be even more specific, and as I said, we have our 4 partners in GREENFOOT. They have 4 very well-known football-related buildings or facilities. The French national training facility in Clairefontaine, which is a huge facility, the Dalga Arena in Azerbaijan, the Aviva Stadium in Ireland, and the Eleda Stadium in the city of Malmö. So going from this very general question of would you be interested in crowdfunding to would you be interested in any form of football stadium or library or school, we now go to showing people in France the Clairefontaine picture, and in Ireland we showed them the Aviva Stadium, and we asked them, think about investing in this building in your country, and whether or not that makes a difference is what we've been interested in. So first off, and here we don't show you the differences between the countries, because I think it's more interesting to see the difference between football fans and not football fans. We see that 40% of all the fans said, yes, I am very likely or likely to invest. We also see that 30% of all non-fans would participate, which again is interesting, because it seems to show that having an idea of the building, knowing what it is about, and knowing about the very specific framing of the crowdfunding campaign also interests people who might not be interested in football per se. On the other side of the scale, so who is unlikely and very unlikely, we see the exact opposite. Only 30%, a third of the fans would rather not participate, and about 40% of the non-football fans said they'd be very unlikely to join such a crowdfunding campaign. And then, and here we come back to something that I showed you beforehand. We ask them a hypothetical question. So we ask them, imagine you've just invested €1,000 in the crowdfunding campaign in your country and for your national building. What kind of reward would you want to see? And again, what pops up is the free electricity for 1 year at their home. So again, something related to energy, but in their specific personal environment. For us, this is a really interesting result. As said at the beginning, EDF is on board of our project. So we are in a very good position to think about how can we involve a larger group of stakeholders in the crowdfunding campaign to actually give people the opportunity to choose such a reward. Could EDF, National Football Association, and the crowdfunding platform come together, work together to make these kinds of rewards happen? Not everything is always successful when you sit at your desk and think about great rewards. What we thought would be really fantastic merchandising articles, like giving fans the opportunity to get something from their favorite team that they have no other way of getting, and that would be something that they prefer maybe over a financial reward. Here we suggested specific, very special VIP tickets to sports events. But as you can see, this was far less interesting than we had actually imagined it would be. But this is good to know. Good, we ask people, so this is not going to, probably not something that we completely throw out of the window, but might not be something that is that successful in rewarding people for their participation in a crowdfunding campaign. I have a final slide here, and this is, I guess, one that is interesting from different points of view. That was the very final question in our questionnaire, which is pretty long, a pretty long questionnaire. So when people arrived at this question, they had already heard a lot about crowdfunding and football crowdfunding. But here we ask them, okay, now just tell us if there was an interesting crowdfunding campaign out there, and we tell you that you would be refunded in proportion to your actual investment in the crowdfunding campaign. How much would you give? And the first thing that is interesting from my point of view is that about a fourth or less of people wouldn't invest at all. So the overwhelming majority would say, I would invest something. Among those who say, I'd be interested in investing in a crowdfunding campaign, the majority come up with values that say under €300, so small scale investment. We also see, and here we have significant country differences, where we have looked, for example, at Sweden. They have the highest share of non-investors, but also the highest share of people, or comparably high share of people who would invest larger amounts, here 500 to €1,000. This in turn, and we are not finished with analyzing the survey data that we have. And this is just some key things that I thought we thought that be interesting for today. We will dive deeper into this, also in thinking about how we can frame the crowdfunding campaign specifically to country preferences. Part that I also didn't show here is that, of course, the usual suspects, as I said before, sociodemographics. We know a lot about sociodemographics of the people who participated in the survey, and we're looking at that also to get a better understanding of how that influences the motivation to get engaged. So very quickly, some of the key things that we think are interesting from our work so far in the survey. A lot of people are interested in football. This is not surprising. We knew that people are interested in football, but here this gives us a good number and a good indication of the general public. Interestingly, protecting the environment might be a strong reason to participate and something to keep in mind when framing and marketing our campaigns. The interest of people to not get a direct euro amount back for their investment, but maybe something else like a reduction on their electricity bill opens up our minds to thinking creatively about rewards. We see that socially designed crowdfunding campaigns have a higher likelihood of people have a higher likelihood of joining them in comparison to football specific ones, but not when we talk about fans. And this is interesting for our project in specifically. So football fans, thankfully, we hope to get as many as possible on them on board in our project. We are on all the social media channels. We have a newsletter that you can easily subscribe to on our website. And we are happy to answer questions and get in touch if there's anything else you would like to know about GreenFoot. Thank you.
Andrea, thank you for this first introduction. A lot of interesting points you have raised and a lot of questions I would like to ask you. Just, something that came to my mind while you were going through the data is that you can always dig a little bit deeper when you collect this type of information. So you could, dive deeper into understanding the breakdown of potential investors in terms of age and gender and level of income, and see if there is a different distribution within each group, and those that will be willing to or very likely to invest, and you could kind of play with it a bit. So I think that this is absolutely interesting, and it is fundamental, as you were saying, to understand these things, because the preparation and the design of a crowdfunding campaign, from also experience, from what we have seen in the years working with crowdfunding platforms and project owners, represents the majority of the chances of success of a crowdfunding campaign. So if you know who you're talking to and you know what their level of willingness to invest is, and you know what is interesting for them in terms of payback for their investment, I think that you have a lot of your work cut out for yourself. And so this is absolutely interesting to, and I look forward to asking you more about this 4 partner stadiums that you've presented and see how they will approach this in the future. But so I leave this open for a second, and I would like to call on stage formally our colleague Andrea Bogi, because we've seen this topic of crowdfunding within the football industry, but we have approached this from the general population and potential investor side. But what my question to you would be is, of course, do we know anything about the perception of these types of initiatives from the crowdfunding industry perspective? So what is the level of interest and potential kind of best practices that we might have coming from crowdfunding platforms, and of course, in turn, being proposed by football clubs? So with this one question, I would leave it to you to explain us further.
Thank you, Francesca. Yes, indeed. I think I would have to say that, as Andrea already mentioned before, on one side, the connection with crowdfunding is immediately apparent because there is an energy transition in place, there's needs of investment, and there's a huge gap in investment where crowdfunding can already play a role, and it already is, because energy investment through crowdfunding is actually not something new. It's something that we've seen has been developing in the last few years, particularly in some countries like France. So it's something going on. So there's already a space there for energy investment. Then the other aspect, it's in terms of the football investment, why football could be interested in crowdfunding, what is there? And then, of course, it's the fact that football, by its nature, it has already a crowd that's well established. And then there's also the fact that even though many people would say, why football clubs that have so much money to play players and engage players would need to reach out to the crowd and complicate their lives in that way. And on one side, we also need to remember that big clubs are not the only one that exist. There's a The large majority of stadiums and facilities are actually small facilities, amateur clubs or medium-sized clubs for second or third tier. And also the fact that more often than not, even big clubs are hugely indebted. They have huge cash problem. And that's something, for example, COVID exacerbated quite a lot. They had a huge loss of revenue, which crowdfunding can cover, leveraging on the need on one side of promoting energy transition and reducing even costs, considering huge energy spikes in recent months. And then, of course, engage the crowd in a more active way, which for football clubs could be quite a plus. Moving that discourse on the other side, on the crowdfunding side, of course, this is a huge opportunity for crowdfunding because it can, as we saw, one of the main barriers in this field, like in most fields for crowdfunding, is the knowledge about it. People might be aware, there's a limit to the extent in which they're aware or still participate. And football and the energy transition have a huge window that crowdfunding can use to just spread the message, to say, we are here and we can do this. And the main point is, of course, to see, to answer the question, how this can be done and can this be successful? And the main answer for us is actually yes. And the answer is yes, because we know that it already did. It already had success before. As part of one of the first exercises of the GREENFOOT project, we actually mapped examples of what was going on. Someone tried this before in sports and sports or energy efficiency in particular. And actually there was quite a lot going on, more than actually we thought. Overall, for example, we mapped around 30 plus projects. There were projects for sports building renovations on one type or another, or even full-fledged construction. Part of those were actually specific for energy efficiency. But what we saw is the fact that, first of all, in the last 2-3 years, these have started to pick up quite a bit, particularly in, of course, the UK, which is the biggest market for crowdfunding. And there's much more knowledge about crowdfunding, and football is also quite well spread. But also the fact that COVID gave, even for them, a huge acceleration. They even developed a specific program with authorities, with the public authorities, to create match funding scheme, public money to support crowdfunding campaign to support clubs in crisis, especially small clubs, which use the money for energy efficiency renovations, mostly lightning or changing the electric system or upgrading the electric system and security measures anti-COVID. So we know that this exists. And then we actually saw that, for example, in Germany, there was a platform, Capilendo, which now actually merged with another one, Investor, one of in the Nordic countries, which previously worked specifically with football clubs, in particular FC Karlsruhe and FC Kaiserslautern, which used crowdfunding to raise around, for each campaign, around 1 or even 2.5 million euros. And this was done in a matter of minutes. During the launch of the campaign, of course, they did the groundwork, but then they used the visibility of football during football matches to promote the campaign, which was in one case, of course, to build a new training facility, and it was extremely successful. So we know there is potential there. And also we know that football would allow crowdfunding an additional flexibility of what they already do. Because crowdfunding by its nature, there are different crowdfunding models that can be adopted depending on the situation, the money they want to raise, the type of rewards they might be willing to do. And crowdfunding and football have the possibility to even multiply this variety, because then you can offer monetary rewards naturally in terms of return of interest for investment, but you can use some of those to offer, tickets for a football match. You can offer entry and tickets for a training session with the favorite football players, autographs, all kinds of things that can help reduce the cost actually of the crowdfunding campaign. And then, of course, there's all the energy part that comes into the mix. And that in particular is something that we saw on other campaigns, for example, in the Netherlands, where crowdfunding platform works specifically to install solar panels on 2 stadiums. And what they did was to work with the energy provider to provide the return on investment in the energy bill, which, as we saw from Andrea, it's actually something that people are extremely keen to have and it's something that now with a huge spike in energy prices, it's something that football clubs could really play along if they want to launch a campaign in this sense. So we have a huge amount of data to see this works. Of course, there's the issue of what's missing now. And the point is, the market is still well fragmented. We have different cases, but they're very spread around different circumstances. It's very difficult for football clubs that might want to do this to have a clear idea of what they can do. We know for a fact, having interviewed some platforms, that they might have talked before with some football clubs, but they didn't really understand what crowdfunding was, how they can use it. They were a bit uncertain, and in the end, nothing happened. And this is what our work in GREENFOOT can come and play, because we can provide a blueprint using the data from the survey and the best practices on how they can approach this. What are the steps? Who are the players that they need to involve? And what are also the different cards they can target beyond football fans? Because there is an energy target, there is social target if you are a small social club that want to raise some money to just engage your local community. And social messaging, social actions go a long way for the raising of this money to engage even additional philanthropic funders. So there's a huge field of opportunities. There's a huge market for crowdfunding, and football clubs need to take advantage of this. Now is probably the best time to start engage, start see. Also because the market is evolving, there's something that's moving. There's also plenty of money coming in from the public side, which means that that can be combined with crowdfunding schemes to kind of raise the bar. Also because, let's not forget, most of stadiums in Europe, maybe with the exception of the UK, are actually public buildings that are leased to football clubs, which means you need to work with the public side and the private side. And again, crowdfunding provides that flexibility in a big way.
Absolutely, thank you. There is no way around the public sector, and rightly so, because these interventions are within their areas of competence. But it's always good to provide them with an alternative option, especially when we're undergoing a period of budgetary constraints for them, and this could open up new opportunities for citizens and fans, as we were saying. But what I think it's really interesting is to go back a bit to the fund base and think about the distribution of the survey that Andrea has presented, and the distribution of actual fans of national teams. So to phrase my next question a bit more precisely, I was thinking that national teams are, of course, supported for the large majority by nationals of each specific country. But they might not be living at the very moment in that specific country. For example, Andrea Bogi, sorry about this to Andrea's part. Andrea Bogi, I know you're Italian and you're living now in Brussels, and you might be a huge supporter of your national team just because you're Italian and football is huge in Italy. So my question would be, is the survey also kind of regrouping this type of individuals? Has this been defined in terms of geographical outreach of the survey, or was it open to people that were also coming from other countries and they would just follow up with updates from national associations or the channels through which this survey was promoted? And then connecting to this is not just speculation from my side. It's because I'm thinking of the new regulation that has come into force for crowdfunding. So the European Crowdfunding Service Provider Regulation. And so with that regulation that will affect the or is actually going to change the way that crowdfunding operations, especially for lending and equity, which are the two main models for deep retrofit interventions or energy efficiency interventions. Platforms are going to be able to open up to a true European market. So they're going to be able to operate in all member states and welcome investors from any member state. So how is this going to kind of interact? And can this be leveraged and combined to amplify the opportunity? So I would ask Andrea Kollmann to just give us a, kind of an overview about the fund-based distribution, and then hand over to Andrea Bogi.
So we didn't specifically look at this to look at what other non-national football group teams or clubs somebody from, let's say, Azerbaijan would support. What I showed before is that the national team, as well as smaller local teams, made up about 60% of the teams that people said that they are interested in. So this, as you said, that leaves open 40% of people saying, I don't know, I'm Austrian, I'm Madrid fan, for example, or Italian national team fan if my own team hasn't made it to the final round. But I can't give you an immediate answer to that, but I think it's, I don't know, Andrea, if you have a better feeling about this in terms of how crowdfunding schemes are set up. From our survey, no, I cannot come up with a verified answer that is funded in the survey that we did.
I think in a way, of course, we didn't really cover in specific that kind of a scenario, but what we know is the fact that, of course, there are, especially in some countries, there's a lot of people living abroad who might support. Then, of course, the new regulation would allow to have a pan-European away campaign, which could target different audiences in different countries. But I think maybe even more so than the fund base per se, on that aspect could play much more on the energy supporters, because that is much more widespread across Europe. It will very much depend on income availability to actually invest. So what I think could happen, and we will actually have to look into it in the coming months in GREENFOOT, is the fact that with the European crowdfunding markets, we will be able on one side to select maybe crowdfunding platform. There are big players that already work on it, and you don't need to look, especially for Eastern Europe or country like Azerbaijan. We will not have necessary to find a platform there, but maybe it's not developed enough, doesn't provide the guarantees, but we can find a platform anywhere. And then the fund that we can play, I think, more the fund base, the energy part, to say that if you want to invest in the energy transition and maybe even an economic return for this, and maybe you live in a country that doesn't have the ability, or you don't have the opportunity, so you don't see it, we can give you the opportunity to invest anywhere in a big project that's supported by National Football Association, the support maybe even the municipality, local municipality, or a big energy provider, for example, EDF, and to invest your money in a secure way for a good goal across Europe. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what you do. And this is something that I think for some could be appealing. Probably it's going to take some time before the crowd is developed enough to understand that this is actually an opportunity. You can do it properly, especially maybe that those are less financially savvy. But since I suppose the crowdfunding legislation will take some time to actually kick up on the gears to enter full into force, there will be some time to adjust for different players. I would see that we will definitely take advantage for this.
Absolutely. I think that this is indeed a very, very good opportunity that we will see unravel before our eyes. I will take this last 10 minutes to ask the participants, if anyone has any questions, to please type it in the chat, and this is your chance to address our two experts. While we wait for potential questions to come in, and since we're moving towards the closing of this session, I would like to ask Andrea Kollmann, what are the next steps for the GreenFoot project? Because you've told us that you have a time horizon that spans until August 2023. So we have almost 2 years ahead of us. So what are the next steps? What are we going to achieve in these coming months?
So in parallel to working on the design of crowdfunding campaigns, our technical partners have actually had a detailed look at the 4 facilities and buildings that I showed you. And they came up with renovation and energy, renewable energy installation ideas specifically for these buildings. And we are currently discussing the outcomes of this analysis. So what makes sense in Clairefontaine, what could make sense, what could be interesting actually, what will it cost, what are payback times, what kind of investment are we looking for? And we are currently in the state where we bring these 2 aspects of our work together, crowdfunding schemes, and now we know what we would like to do, and the football associations have made up their mind about what they want to do. And with this, which is going to be the outcome of the work, I would say, Andrea, correct me, but I would say in the next 2 months, we are going to go into designing the actual crowdfunding platform projects, and then try it out and see if it works, which I hope we can give an answer to by the end of this year, early next year.
Absolutely. And if you do have this type of answer, let us know, and we'll be happy to have a second session, or a third session actually, and present what the outcome has been. So basically the idea is that, Andrea, Bogi, if I am a platform, a crowdfunding platform, or if I am a club, a football club, how can I interact with the GreenFoot project? So what is the benefit for me from these activities that you're doing? For example, if I'm in a, let's say, in a country that is not covered by the survey, so I don't directly benefit from the information, how can I engage and potentially have some benefits from these activities?
All right, let's divide it maybe into 2. In terms of the crowdfunding platform, of course, on one side, we will also collect, we are also collecting reference points or different crowdfunding platforms that can be engaged, not only by the pilots, but even after that, once we actually validate the concept, they can in the future be a reference for other football stadiums or football camps that might be interested. We can reference them. They can see what we have done, what other platforms have done, and kind of adapt their model. And I think GreenFoot will provide kind of a blueprint also on what lessons they need to keep in mind in terms of how to structure the campaign. In particular, keep in mind that there are different actors, especially if you're not a platform that's used to do energy crowdfunding. There are specific actors they need to keep in mind. They can use to leverage their return of interest or other aspects in order to make the campaign more successful. And also in terms of just the messaging and the targeting from the survey, especially whether they should do more on the football fans, whether the energy crowds should be more engaged, and the different combination this can be done at the same time. On the football side, I would say, first of all, that the GreenFoot is actually open to interested proposition, because, for example, our initial pilots were only 3. And then afterwards, we expanded to Sweden with the Malmö football club that expressed an interest in being part of it. So this is something that actually GreenFoot will look into it. Maybe not within the last one of the projects that Andrea maybe can answer better on this. But I mean, there is opportunity to open this discussion for others to participate, or just to be there and learn from the experience. And then there's the fact that overall, on both sides, in platform and football clubs, they should not be afraid to kind of try to engage and explore. Football clubs can get out there and explore new funding opportunities. They need to see as something that it's worth discussing, because it can provide huge boosts. And also, for example, it's not limited to financial systems. If they are small clubs, or they don't have the financial capacity or interest maybe to go all in from the beginning, there are non-financial options like donation and rewards campaigns. They do work. They have actually been much more popular so far for small social clubs. That can be an option, and there can be also starting points. For example, in Azerbaijan, that's something maybe can be an option, since the market is not really developed. We will see about that. But they need to engage. And platform also, they can go out and explore this possibility with showing that this is a market that they can work on. They have the expertise, and they can reference GREENFOOT as an example of this is something that's going to go forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. So there are ways, a number of ways to benefit from the project and engage. And actually about this, I wanted to just mention that there is a website where all the information about these activities that you're conducting and the future outcomes and whatever update you might have on the topics related to our discussion today is available. And I am actually going to paste the link into the chat for our attendees to look at when they have time or if they're interested. And also I wanted to mention that there is indeed a collection of case studies that has been developed. Andrea, you were mentioning the 30+ projects that you have analyzed. I think that report is also available, and that might be of inspiration for football clubs, potentially platforms, public authorities, because we were mentioning earlier, and we unfortunately don't have enough time to explore all the interesting points of this discussion. But again, public authorities are most of the times or want to engage with crowdfunding. We have been seeing this since a number of years now, especially in combination with the resources that are flowing into the European economy, especially through public budgets and towards the energy transition and refurbishment of buildings. So this can be an inspiration to a number of different stakeholders coming from different industries. I have checked the chat, and I have seen no question at this moment. So I think this is a last call. If there is any question, shoot it now, or in case, you can always contact Andrea Kollmann and Andrea Bogi. You have seen their contacts earlier in the session today. I take this opportunity to thank both of you for joining us, for providing this very fruitful insights into what you're doing. Absolutely interesting, I think, for a number of reasons, from the side of football fans that might want to engage more, small clubs that are looking for a way to fund part of their activities or to engage more with their fund bases, big clubs that are looking for options to put forward different investments or to build different financial schemes, public authorities that might be the owners of the buildings, but also, I would dare to say, institutional investors that are not willing to bear the, let's say, risk, if we could call it risk, or weight, bear the entire weight of the investment that is needed to renovate buildings, and want to maybe dilute this or take on board only a part and include crowdfunding in the financial scheme. So I think there is a lot to explore. I wish you both successful outcomes within this project. We are very much looking forward to updates. Again, the website of the project is available. And well, I think that this is it for today. Thank you.
Francesca, thank you very much.
Thank you indeed.